This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Shahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellow Wall podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 351 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we will talk about Edin Terzic's maiden voyage as BVB's head coach, and we will preview Friday's game. Yes, Friday's game against 6th place Union Berlin. For all that and more joins me Matthias Zug. Hello Matthias, how are you doing? It's nice to have you on this soon again.
Yeah, it's great to be back again so soon. I am doing well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing fairly well myself, since apparently being asked how you're doing equals a weather update, and I am happy to report it snowed in Philadelphia. So for the first time in 2 years, yay, still get a winter, it seems. But other than that, not too many things did change, other than, of course, that Dortmund jumped to 4th place in the Bundesliga, beating Werder Bremen 2-1, thanks to goals scored by Rafael Guerreiro and Marco Reus, as VfL Wolfsburg lost their unbeaten streak at the Allianz Arena, which enabled Dortmund to reclaim a Champions League spot in the table. So, Matthias, obviously the Bremen game was highly anticipated due to the fact that there was a different guy on the sideline, even though it was the same guy who had been on the sideline beforehand, just 3 seats further down, let's say. So, what did you make of this setup and the game? I think Terzic reverted back to the 4-2-3-1, and we had Youssoufa Moukoko starting from the beginning for the first time in his still very young career.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this was the match. I made sure I'm like, oh no, I gotta go. It's starting live. Real life has to pause because obviously everybody kind of wanted to see what's Dortmund going to be like, what's going to be the reaction, who's this Edin Terzic tactically. And, it's interesting to go with Moukoko from the beginning. I don't necessarily think it was the right match for that. Just like I don't think Union Berlin would be either, just because you're dealing with very, let's say, savvy defenders. And Moukoko, for the most part, was, let's just say he didn't have a great match, but that's also partly because he was like 10 centimeters too short twice. Otherwise, Holland would have scored 2 of those chances just because he's taller. His frame is longer. So, he got into the right positions. I thought he did okay. But overall, I thought it was good. I mean, it was a win. It was, I think you tweeted out Arbeitssieg.
Yes.
And that's what you kind of, these midweek matches in December, they're almost never, COVID or no COVID year, almost never things of beauty, but rather things of necessity to kind of get through. Always think about those kind of this time of year DFB Pokal ties of Bundesliga teams. It's never pretty. It's never the most amazing football spectacle, but Dortmund got the 3 points. They showed some energy early. That energy kind of went away.
At least it's
quicker
something.
than I would have hoped for. But that also has to do with just being tired. I mean, they just got their asses handed to them. And are, they're playing every 3 or 4 days or every 2 days, I guess it seems. But overall, it was good. Terzic, I think, did okay. He used 4 of 5 substitutions, so we still don't have a Dortmund manager who uses all subs. But I mean, that may also just be down to who's available and what the situation dictates when you look at the fact that 3 of his 4 substitutions were made in the final 10 minutes. Okay, fine.
Should have been sooner, maybe.
Should have been sooner. just to get some people off the pitch that should have been off the pitch maybe a little bit sooner. But, overall, I can't complain about it. 3 points is what was needed, and against a difficult opponent, Dortmund delivered the 3 points, albeit not the prettiest fashion, but that's okay. I'd rather occasionally have an unpretty win than an unpretty loss.
Yeah, I mean, I said it pre-pod. I do believe that it would have been highly likely that Dortmund had won this game, even with Lucien Favre on the sideline, just because if you are Borussia Dortmund and you get shellacked 5-1, then you will show a reaction one way or the other. So I sort of expected this to happen, but regardless, it's a good start for Terzic, and obviously I do not expect Dortmund to play a high pressing or high energy style at all right now, to be honest, just because I look at almost every other club in the Bundesliga, maybe barring Leverkusen. Even Leipzig and Gladbach are struggling, and Bayern, of course, are also clawing back from, conceding the first goal. I think 6 consecutive times Bayern had to eat the 1-0 now. So, this is not going to be pretty months, and due to the lack of a winter break and hardly any regeneration and recuperation, I don't expect this to change at all after the turn of the year. So it is what it is basically. But there were a couple of differences. For example, Dortmund scored for the first time within the opening half hour of a Bundesliga game this season, which is crazy, right? But Rafael Guerreiro scoring in the 12th minute was a good goal. I liked the way that Dortmund scored it. In the end, maybe a bit unlucky in the way that they had a deflection, and then Guerreiro sort of scored on a rebound. But the way they built the goal, I think, was pretty nifty. Jadon Sancho with a square pass, and the way he was fed that ball was pretty good. So I'm fairly happy with how Dortmund managed to open Bremen up. And if you look at the expected goals, Bremen had 0.2 over the entire time. So that they scored with this one chance that they had basically was a bit frustrating, and sort of threw them back a bit. And Martin Rahfeld, he recently said something that really stuck with me. He said, under pressure you become your habits. And I think after Kevin Möwald scored the equalizer, we really saw Dortmund really reverting to that old Favre system of being more passive, right?
Yeah, it was a little weird. Like, it was like a switch went on at the beginning, and there was energy and pressing and intensity, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, it's Klopp again!" And then it didn't. It slowed down immensely. Part of that might also be just down to the opposition, of course, making things a little bit harder, even though I thought Bremen was pretty, I don't know, I'm not going to say passive, but they didn't do a ton, in my opinion. Nothing memorable for sure, aside from an amazing shot from Möwald, which just have to say that was just an amazing shot, which Bremen somehow always get against Dortmund. I mean, at least it wasn't bit and quit this time. But it slowed down, and in the second half there was, and also the match commentary. I mean, Ovo Moyela, which, can we stop having Ovo Moyela comment on Dortmund Bremen matches? I think this is one of the few times where it's gone well for Dortmund. But you could tell he was getting frustrated actually on the commentary with, it's kind of slow, it's side to side. Once Dortmund picked up the tempo, they created chances. And what was interesting, as a side note, usually the match is done, I turn off ESPN. I didn't this time because I got a text message and checked it. The audio was still running on the commentary, and you heard Ovo Moyela just go, he didn't say anything, but it was like, poof. You could just tell he was like, oh my God, that was not amazing. And you could just tell he was frustrated and would have hoped for more continued energy, at least for longer than we saw. And it kind of reflected the match. It was Arbeit Sieg, and it was also Arbeit's commentary in that sense. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I was waiting. I'm like, is he going to say something? Is somebody going to say something like really stupid on air? But didn't. But that kind of sums it up. I feel like there were a lot of players. There were some players that were really on their game, and some, they were just non-existent. I mean, Marco Reus was, in the first half, I was very critical of him, but he picked it up a lot in the second half. Bellingham, I forgot he was on the pitch for most of the time. Jadon Sancho was ineffective most of the time, and Mateus Morey, in my opinion, was kind of a defensive liability most of the time. So I don't know if I'm being too harsh, Stefan. How did you see those guys?
No, I think you're not too harsh. I think Morey, also in the game against Stuttgart and the game before that, he looks very shaky at the back. I don't know if there's another way to put it than that, which is obviously sad, because if we remember when I think was against Red Bull, when he had a really fantastic game. But yeah, I mean, he's still a very young defender, so I would cut him some slack in that regard. But yeah, he obviously needs to come up with something better. And as for Jadon Sancho, I think Edin Terzic said today at the news conference that it was very close for him for the proverbial not to burst. However, yeah, I mean, he scored this offside goal. But what I found more interesting is that Terzic talked about, getting Reus and Sancho back to form is also mostly about reminding them that of sort of the plays and the things that did work for them in the past. And what he said, it's about reminding the players what did work for them in the past. For example, that you don't stop the ball first, but immediately take a positive touch, either in forward direction or a pass. But it's also about making sure they have players in the area to play an immediate 1-2. And I thought it was very interesting, because that really does sort of nail it down. Because how many times have Dortmund players slowed plays down themselves just because they took another unnecessary touch? I feel like Dortmund have been the world champion in unnecessary touches in recent months, and I don't know if that's a Favre thing or not, where you sort of take a security touch or whatever in order to not lose the ball, but actually you make life harder on yourself just because it allows opponents more time to close you down and everyone around you. So I think there are some tactical solutions to it, but obviously players need to play with a bit more risk, and I think we saw that already. And I mean, Dortmund right now are giving the ball away as is. The number is pretty high. I think on Adam Dorowski's Twitter you can read all about it, how Dortmund, the amount of passes they had intercepted by opponents just went from like 5 to 8 to 20 now, and I think it was 19 or 20 again against Bremen. So it's good that at least Dortmund increased the risk a tiny bit, and I think there is some reward in that, because if you play like you do against Stuttgart, where you play quote unquote risky in spaces where you don't, you're not going to gain any yield anyway. So yeah, I think that's the main positive, that Dortmund are going to be a bit more direct again. And I have to say, in many phases this game was maybe shockingly open, but for Dortmund this can also be a positive, since they do transition well from time to time. They didn't do so much against Bremen, but in theory they do. So if the game is a bit more chaotic, I think Dortmund can actually also gain something from that, instead of just playing against a 10-man defense or so. So, yeah, I think Bremen tactically didn't do too many things to really stifle Dortmund. And I have to say that the lack of pace in Bremen's attack, really also didn't help. You could see the contrast to what a team Stuttgart is and what the team Bremen is. So we just need to keep this in context. That it was a struggle against 13 or 14 Bremen now, who are not really good and who haven't won at home in a very long time. So while these are obviously nice and much needed 3 points, this wasn't the quote unquote Befreiungsschlag, as you would say, where, Dortmund just flicked the switch and everything is good again. So, and especially Matthias, when we talk about the differences between Terzic and Favre, maybe one similarity after the penalty was scored, immediately was Emre Can on for Moukoko, and then I think we saw Piszczek, and then later obviously Zagadou for Hummels, because Hummels had cramps, I think. So that really tells you that immediately I felt like as soon as Dortmund went ahead, the signal from the sideline was, we're going to sit on this scoreline now. And then for a couple minutes leading into stoppage time, I felt that Dortmund were sort of inviting too much pressure again, which was a symptom or something they had last season very often, and something they didn't do in a long time under Favre once they had the lead. So this was maybe cause for concern there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it was, I think it was described as a power play from Bremen for quite a while there in the second half. And I am always opposed to those type of tactics, because eventually, I mean, it didn't happen this time, but I feel like it's one of those, how best to describe this? Probably, I watched Tottenham against Liverpool. And for the longest time, they were sitting on that 1-1. Liverpool go ahead near the end. And all of a sudden, they're like, oh, we got to do something. And then time runs out. And it's so hard to switch over and all of a sudden be proactive rather than reactive. And so I don't like that. And I really don't like it when you are clearly the better side. I mean, from a quality of player standpoint, it's not a comparison. Dortmund are on paper a better side than Bremen. Granted, on paper, they're also better than Stuttgart. And that didn't really pan out that well. So it was a little nervy, but at the end of the day, they got what they needed. Bremen really didn't create many situations where I'm like, oh, here we go. This could be it. If anything, Dortmund occasionally, especially in build-up play, kind of in transition just before the halfway, middle of the pitch, they would lose the ball, and far too often it was Guerrero, and that for me, that's why I don't like the grades that Kika give out, because it's kind of like, oh, he scored a goal, so he must have a great grade. I think Guerrero has become a defensive liability in many situations. He's almost too nonchalant. Tried to play a few 1-2s again with Gio Reyna deep in Dortmund's own third, and that's just, you don't do that. I'm sorry. That's suicide. And if you didn't learn that against Stuttgart, you're just lucky that Bremen are relatively inept right now in many, many aspects. So that kind of stuff needs to go away. And it's something that needs to be discussed. I mean, should Guerrero, here's a different question. It has nothing to do with this match, Stefan, but I'm very curious. Should there be a thought of moving Guerrero to a central midfield position like he played under Thomas Tuchel, and having a more out-and-out fullback at the left-back position?
Well, you can make the argument in the way that you look at Julian Brandt and the defensive liability that he is at the moment when he is playing as a number 8. You look at Jude Bellingham, who plays a number 8, but his creative output is not really there in the form that his forward and forward passes and his chance creating actions are just not really significant that would warrant this sort of position for him right now. I'll be brutally honest. The kid is 17, but Dortmund do need to qualify for the Champions League, and there's a certain benchmark. So if Guerrero can play a little better, sure, but at the same time, I would say instead just maybe play the hood there. And I agree and disagree with you at the same time about the 1-2s in your own third, because I think in the current situation, you're completely right. It is suicide, but in general, I would actually welcome it that Dortmund managed to combine their way out of their own third and further up the pitch. Sort of theoretically, that's exactly how you want it to go. But when in recent times, exactly these kinds of passes have led to disaster, maybe avoided. So, it's a difficult one. I also think that Giroud just needs a freaking break, to be honest, because he's sort of touch and go with injury right now. He had a couple of muscular problems. When he returned, he was immediately playing again just because he's way too important for Dortmund. And you just can't discount the upside that he has. So, it's a bit of a conundrum right now, but that's the problem in late December and going into January and February, that you will have a lot of tired players that are important, but I think you need to flick on that rotation machine one way or another. I don't know if you'll do that at Union Berlin, considering this game is sort of the last game of the year. The cup game, I think Dortmund can also maybe win with a 1B or 2 squad, something like that. But Matthias, before we talk really about the Union game, I know you told me you were a bit tired and low on energy and low on nutrition right now. So I don't know if I can get a good rant out of you. But how did it happen that Dortmund play back-to-back away games as a European team on Tuesday and Friday in an English week? How did the DFL come up with that great idea?
I asked myself that same question. Aside from the fact that Dortmund is playing away against two teams that don't have the same fixture congestion as them, if this was against two other Champions League and Europa League teams, I'd probably be a little bit less annoyed. If this was a Gladbach, I don't know who else is Gladbach-Hoffenheim situation, I would have been like, okay, everyone's on the same level of tired. But you already saw it against Stuttgart. Stuttgart played high energy, aggressive the entire match because guess what? They're playing once a week. And that just gives you so much more time to rest, recover, and prepare. Those are three things that Dortmund just don't have. And I don't understand why they set a Friday match in an English week anyway, regardless of who's playing. But then on top of that, you have Dortmund, who has, with all the European teams, just the most matches. You could say the only one that has, well, they don't have more. They have the same amount because they both played in the Super Cup, is Bayern. And then you also talk about the amount of players that have to play internationally that didn't really get a break. It's, they talk a good game about player safety and health. But then they don't really do anything about it in situations like this. I mean, you knew what this season's going to be. It's no news that we have a pandemic. In an English week, just don't set a Friday match. Just don't, no matter which team you're looking at. But then if you do, not to sound brutally elitist, but pick teams that played on Tuesday that don't play in Europe. That would be the solution if you desperately need that Friday match.
Make it the classic throwaway Friday night game that it so often is anyway, where you watch Hertha against Mainz or some bullshit. Right?
Yeah, exactly. No, that it still wouldn't have been great for those teams. Don't get me wrong. I think you just don't need to do that in an English week. And oftentimes they don't. They don't necessarily have a Friday match after a packed international break. So why to do it now when it's your own league and your own competition that's dealing with it with your own clubs? It's rather, it doesn't look good, to say the least. I think it should have been avoided at all costs. If we look at, who else is playing, you look at who's playing on the Sunday. Freiburg and Hertha and Wolfsburg and Stuttgart. I mean, why are they playing on a Sunday? But then, Dortmund have to play on a Friday, and the bulk of all the other international competition teams are playing on a Saturday. I mean, it doesn't make sense, in my opinion. It's horrendous scheduling from the DFL. And what you're asking for is even more injuries and fatigue. This plays fully into Union Berlin's hands, who don't even have to travel. Dortmund players have to go to Berlin. Berlin, Dortmund, that's not 20 minutes away. You got to take a few hours to get there. And so you're losing more recovery time in the sense of how a physio recovers you, not how you and I recover on the sofa, but how athletes need to recover.
Oh, it's not the same thing, Matthias? I thought I recover like any other professional when I just spread out on the sofa.
I know you're a supreme physical specimen athletically, so you're probably the exception to the rule. Speaking for myself as a slightly older, not old, even now, you even have me saying
just
that.
Accept your role as on the Yellowwallpod. Just
the old
give
man.
in.
The old guy who keeps on yelling, "Get off my lawn!" Well, DFL, get off my fucking lawn.
Yeah, it's a nice episode title.
Get off my fucking lawn.
Comma DFL. Yeah, why not? Yeah, I don't know. We might get a explicit tag though. Anywho, so yeah. Speaking of injuries, though, some good news. Thomas Meunier and Thomas Delaney are both fit and have traveled with the team. I think the victims of them recovering from injury both is that Felix Passlack and Heinier have been dropped and didn't travel to Berlin, and it's kind of nice when players need to take the plane that they are sort of forced to go through the airport, and then my good old colleague Florian Gröger and anyone else staking out at the airport, they can just count who is there and who isn't. So that makes the reporting always rather easy and very solid. Especially if you live in Holzwickede or Unna in that area. But I digress. So, Matthias, Thomas Delaney has been an important part before his injury. I thought he was in a very good form, and obviously Thomas Meunier. As you well know, the things turned sour when obviously he was subbed out against Cologne. That's when Dortmund conceded that set piece. So you've already designated Moray as a liability. So do you slot both these players back in right away, or what does Matthias Zug do with 3 days and one and a half of recuperation really to prepare for this match between Bremen and Union?
Well, I mean, you should at least strongly consider playing Schulz and Passlack at the fullback positions.
Well, Passlack isn't there.
Sorry. Well, honestly, I may even consider Emre Can at this point, just because Moray might be a good kid. I'm not convinced of him in this type of form and run that someone who would then be so exposed would be the right one. And can he stop cutting in? I mean, for the love of God, sometimes maybe stay a little wider.
I thought
give your team a little bit of width.
I actually thought his decision making in the final third wasn't that bad. I thought he had a couple good crosses.
I'm not talking the final third. I'm talking like the middle of the pitch. It's like, I'm going to cut in now, lose the ball, and now you've got a problem. And I just feel Union Berlin's the kind of club that will just take a lot of advantage of him. I don't know about Piszczek. I mean, maybe you could even start with Piszczek at right back and kind of see how it goes, because he may get beaten for pace on occasion, but he won't get beaten for positioning and experience, which is obviously something that Moray is lacking. So I wouldn't start him. I wouldn't start Guerrero, to be honest. I would also, if you have the option, not start Jadon Sancho as well. I think I mean, a lot of players just need rest. Okay. But then you have to also look at it as who would maybe benefit from coming off the bench and being that change up. I mean, if you bring Jadon Sancho off the bench, that completely changes the dynamic. And so that's probably a direction I would lean personally.
Yeah. I also don't know if I would start Marco Reus again, just because, I mean, he was arguably maybe even the man of the match against Bremen, and I don't know if we highlighted that enough, that at least his sort of fight that we saw from Reus was maybe one of the biggest positives coming out of this Bremen game. And of course, Marco Reus scoring against his favorite club. I think he has 15 goals now against Bremen, which is more than he scored against any other team. So you sort of expected him to score and nick one away. And overall, I thought he had a really good game. Considered his overall form considered. So at least Dortmund and with the help of Marco Reus sort of forced this win. But I don't know if I would start him at Union Berlin. I'm not entirely sure who I would even start, because I feel like almost everyone needs a rest. I could even think about not starting Hummels, and because what if he tears his gets a muscle tear or so, then he is out for the game against Wolfsburg and the games after that, just because Dortmund will play in a couple of weeks again. So difficult one. It's a real head scratcher for me. Sorry for me this time, because there are more players I want to take out than I have to bring in, if that makes any sense. So I think Torgan Hazard should be an automatic starter. I would also bring Delaney on for Witzel to change it up and pair him up with Dahoud. So I would have an entirely different double pivot, because neither Witzel nor Bellingham have really impressed me in recent weeks. So I think that can go. Then I would revert back to Meunier actually as a right back, even though he has been under a lot of criticism. I would then probably leave the backline Akanji and Hummels as is, and I don't know if I want to start with Nico Schulz. Guerrero has been amazing in too many different ways, but I think you're right. Maybe give him a rest and put him in there, and then up front, I guess I would stick with Moukoko, even though you said earlier you wouldn't. I still think that having him as a striker and making these runs, even if he is still a bit clumsy when it comes to finishing, I think that's important, because he does that actually better than all the other midfielders that sort of had to slot into that position in the wake of Haaland. So I would actually just keep him there, and then as a number 10, I would play Julian Brandt, and left and right, probably Hazard and Reina, as said. That would be sort of my lineup. It's not the prettiest, it's not the most technically advanced that Dortmund have, and it's going to be a struggle one way or another, because I did watch Union play against Bayern, and boy, they should have just, beaten Bayern 4-1, 5-1, also something along these lines. It was a 1-1 draw in the end, but Union Berlin really had so many chances to put this game away that it's just actually surprising how they screwed that one up. So this, I guess, will be Dortmund's hope, that Union Berlin are just as incapable against Dortmund as they were against Bayern. But the problem is obviously that Bayern do have Manuel Neuer in goal, and Dortmund do have Roman Bürki in goal. And while Roman Bürki is an okayish goalkeeper, a good one, Manuel Neuer just makes saves that really do save a lot of points these days. I mean, if you've seen the saves he made against Wolfsburg, it's just ridiculous. And obviously, in the way he plays the sweeper keeper, and that also, kills off a lot of counterattacks that Dortmund do not kill off in that same way. So all these things considered, I've a pit in my stomach going into this tie. Matthias, we also need to look quickly at the injuries and suspensions that Union have. Most prominently, obviously, Max Kruse, who is out with a muscular injury. Also, Anthony Uja isn't there. Robert Andrich is out suspended. Think Ingwertsen, Hübner, and Endo are all doubtful. And obviously, Poyampalo. So, and Nico Schlotterbeck, I shouldn't forget. So this is also quite a list of injuries they have. But if you've seen them play this year at all, what makes this Union Berlin tick, and why is the quote-unquote second year where supposed relegation-threatened teams or promoted sides are supposed to struggle? Why did they actually improve and are in 6th place right now with 18 points, 4 wins, 6 draws, and 2 losses?
Well, aside from Max Kruse, Urs Fischer kind of looked at it, and I feel like, obviously I don't have this confirmed, but they're playing a little bit differently. It's not just a hang on and hope and set pieces and we'll kind of see if we can Darmstadt this thing, because obviously Darmstadt in the second season went down. Union Berlin are on course for Europe, which would be great for them and really funny for Hertha. But they've adapted the way they play. They've changed to become also not just a reactive side, but since they have that in their back pocket, they know how to play that way. That's what makes them so difficult. I mean, if you think about it, look at Dortmund as a juxtaposition. If they would be used to playing on the front foot and being proactive, if all of a sudden they have to try to defend and hold on to a lead, it can get kind of hairy. Or if they're sitting back and all of a sudden have to be proactive after being reactive or just inactive, that would actually be English. They just can't do it. Union Berlin, given that their background of being a more solid defensive side, can then flip a switch and be more attacking, and vice versa. So all credit to Urs Fischer for that. I mean, I didn't think that this would be the Union Berlin we have to see. Now, obviously, there's still a lot of match days left, and they could completely fall apart if certain players get injured. But I've been positively surprised by them. I remember early on watching them against Augsburg and thinking, Augsburg got lucky in that match, which they did, after which they beat Dortmund. So, haha. But Union Berlin were the better side. They created chances. They're not slow. They're not plodding. They're not banking on set pieces. So they're not Schalke. They're a good team. And I feel like I said this off air when Adam was on, and and you guys said, "Oh, Stuttgart worries me." And I'm like, "No, I'm not that worried about them." Anyway, my bigger concern was this match against Union Berlin, and I stand by it. I don't think Dortmund's going to win this one, to be brutally honest. I don't know if they're going to lose it. So basically what I'm saying is they're going to draw. But this is kind of that proverbial, I looked at it and went, that's the trap game. That's the one that could screw Favre. That was not entirely true. But I still stand by that this is going to be a very difficult match for many, many reasons. Also because I believe Union Berlin are set up in a way that they can not just cause Dortmund problems, but actually defeat Dortmund.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they could hit Dortmund on the counterattack with Taiwo Awoniyi, who has been quite prolific in these situations. I mean, against Bayern, he probably should have scored like 3 goals. And obviously, Dortmund still remember Marius Bülter rather well. And Cedric Teuchert is also, good German talent, I would say. He's also quick. So yeah, I mean, there are some good players in there. It's, you think of Union Berlin and think, maybe they have like the, 15th best squad in the Bundesliga. But actually, if you look at the players they have and the way they play, I think there's an argument to be made, maybe top 10. I don't know. And I'm right now they're in 6th place, and it looks earned. It's not just coincidence and lucky point after lucky point for them. So it's going to be really tough, especially if they play with 3 sort of central midfielders. If it's going to be Brömel and Becker and Griesbeck, like who scored, for example, predicts then it's going to be a very difficult one because Union Berlin won't be overly far out. I mean, they might press at some point, but I do expect them to play a bit more like I don't want to say Cologne because it's also not right, but I do expect them to sit back a little bit more and then really narrow down the spaces in the transition between the second and final third for Dortmund. So this is sort of where I assume Dortmund will lose most of the balls and then run into trouble. So these are going to be long, uncomfortable 90 minutes. Now, there's obviously always a chance with Dortmund that they just have a good day, even though they are far and few between these days. But if they do, they can just blow out Berlin. If they score very early and every other chance sits, then Berlin obviously do not have a chance. But it's rather unlikely. Like I said earlier, the goal in the 12th minute in the Bundesliga was the first goal they scored in the first 30 minutes, if I'm not entirely wrong. But that's just ridiculous and goes to show how much Dortmund do struggle. And I don't know how much of the fighting spirit they will bring. But it's going to be a very difficult one, especially since they are playing in a different system now than they did play under Favre. So, there won't be even fear automatism going for them. So I expect Dortmund to be A, tired, B, disjointed, and C, out of form. So, I would actually also pick a draw just because I can't pick them to lose this game, but I'm not very positive, even with a coaching change in recent weeks. So, it is just what it is. It's struggle season right now for Dortmund. So if they surprise me positively, all the better. So Matthias, if you have not much else to say, I think we can just knock it on the head here, and you can predict the game, and then I'll predict the same scoreline.
Yeah, I think I'm going to stick to a draw, and I'm going to make it a 2-2 draw.
Yeah, that would have been my prediction as well. Maybe I'll make it 3-3. Maybe it's going to be one of those crazy ones. I mean, Union Berlin have scored in every match so far, so you can sort of bank on that. And Dortmund's defense will be tested way more than they were against sort of toothless Bremen. So we've seen what kind of havoc Stuttgart can wreak, and I don't think that the quote unquote showing a reaction thing is that much to take into account really, because it's just not. So I'm gonna go with a 3-3 draw, and maybe Moukoko gets one, and Reina, and then a set piece goal or something scrappy from Dortmund. We'll see how this one goes, but thank you anyway for coming on and analyzing this first Terzic game with me. Were you excited though, Matthias? Did you have a little bit of butterflies?
Oh, absolutely. I was really excited about it, and I mean, I wasn't disappointed. It was better than I thought it could have been, and so we'll see. I mean, these are matches that will really early on test him because of who the opponents are.
Yeah. I mean, he's going to play against Wolfsburg very soon, and RB Leipzig, then Gladbach, and obviously Schalke at some point, if the club even exists by then, who knows. But honestly, interesting though, Kicker did report that Dortmund apparently have reached some sort of agreement with Marco Rose, but it's not signed, sealed, and delivered. So Edin Terzic is obviously a Dortmund fan, and he has been for a long time. And I think, even though there are no fans in the stands right now, he may find a way to connect with fans in a way probably better than all his predecessors, meaning except for Klopp, obviously, but probably better than Tuchel did, better than Bosch did, better than Stöger did, and obviously better than Favre did, who was liked around Dortmund, but a lot of fans also just didn't want to see him at the helm because of his preferred playing style. So, how hard do you think he's going to make that decision for Watzke and Sorg going forward when he is, super liked at the end of his little stint?
It'll come simply down to results. and performances. I mean, if Dortmund goes, finish in the Champions League, which I believe they will, if they do so in a positive fashion rather than backing into it like under Peter Stöger, and you add to it a young, dynamic head coach who's liked by everyone, I mean, that's kind of that Cinderella story, the local guy, then yeah, it's going to be a very difficult decision for 1 year, because everybody knows Marco Rose is the guy they want, right? Well, Marco Rose theoretically or technically or potentially has a buyout clause. Be that as it may, his contract also runs out the season after that. So if Terzic does well, Dortmund improve their performances, play really well, get far in the DFB Pokal, qualify for the next round of the Champions League, and qualify for the Champions League in the league in a positive, emphatic fashion, I mean, why make a change at that point? Unless Terzic goes, I'm out. This is not something I can do. He's not going to say that because that would be insane. So yeah, it'll just come down to performance at the end of the day, as it should.
Yeah, it's going to be rather interesting. Maybe Dortmund will make a mistake there and will have the sort of Typhoon Korkut effect. That would be hilarious. Not for me, obviously, but I'm sure someone else would find it funny. Yeah, so interesting thing to observe over the coming weeks, and at what point maybe a decision will even be made. I don't know. Sometimes it could just be that Dortmund and Rose announce their partnership so that also Gladbach can plan for successor, stuff like that. Can something happen quickly in football? We all seen it before. So why not? But Matthias, in the meantime, please tell our listeners how to follow you on Twitter, and then I'll do the rest.
You can find me on Twitter at Matthias Zug.
Very well. You can find me at Stefan Butzko on Twitter. And please go to theyellowwall.net to look for post-match reactions from the Bremen game, and obviously Dorowski's stats sheet, which I thought was very interesting. For example, you could find stats there that tell you that Dortmund had fewer touches than in most games. I think it was the third lowest amount of touches they had, but the third most in the opposing penalty area. So interesting things to read through and ponder about. So check it out. Adam had a couple of rough notes from him going through fbref.com. So yeah, I just asked him whether he could just send it to me and I'll put it on the website, and now you can check it out. So please do that. Otherwise, you can follow us at Yellowwallpod on Twitter and Facebook, and of course subscribe to the show on YouTube, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and all the rest like SoundCloud, etc. And of course, we shall be back after that Union Berlin match, and hopefully in higher spirits than we are right now and less skeptical. So until then, as always, thank you for listening and goodbye.